eighth game of the 1986 World Championship between Kasparov and Karpov. Queen's Gambit declined d37. d4, d5, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop e7, c into d, e into d5, bishop f4, knight f6, e3, Karpov castles, bishop d3. Instead of bishop d3, let us go back and see. Knight f3, bishop f5. This gives equal chances of a equality. Let us go back to the game. Last move played is bishop d3. Black strikes at the center immediately. c6 is solid but passive. An example from Miles and Jakobsen, Denmark 1984. Jakobsen played, instead of c5 he played c6, h3, rook e8, knight f3, knight b d7, queen c2, knight f8, g4, bishop e6, and white castles on the queen side with a very strong attack. Let us go back to the game. Last move played is c5. That is why c6 is passive. Let us go back to the game. Knight f3. If d into c, let us go back and see. If d into c, knight a6, bishop into a6, b into a6, b4, a5, a3, bishop e6, to be followed by a into b, then a5 with the unclear play. So let us go back to the game. Knight c6. Knight c6 is the last move played. Instead of knight c6, if black plays c4, c4 is dangerous for black. Bishop e2, a6, knight e5. Let us go back to the game. Last move played is knight c6. Kasparov castles, bishop g4, winning the knight. Instead of bishop g4, c into d4, let us go back and see that also. C into d4, e into d4, bishop g4 now. White has nothing much. Let us go back. Last move played is bishop g4, d into c5, bishop into c5, h3, bishop into f3. Instead of bishop into f3, bishop h5. Let us go back and see that also. Bishop h5, g4, bishop g6, bishop into g6, h into g6, g5, knight h5, queen into d5. Last move played by black is bishop into f3, queen into f3, d4. Black must dissolve the isolated pawn as white has two active bishops. Knight e4, bishop e7. Bishop e7 is not a good move. The natural move here is knight into e4, bishop into e4, or let us see the other option also here, queen into e4, g6 with equal opportunities. Let us go back and see what happens if a bishop into e4. Bishop into e4, queen b6, rook a c1, bishop e7, rook a d1. After bishop e7, let us go back to the game. What is played is rook a d1. That is after bishop e7. That was the last move played. Queen a5. Queen a5 is not so good move. Better is queen b6. After that, three long combination goes on. Those are starting with bishop g5. Let us go back and see. Bishop g5, knight g3, and bishop d6. These combinations goes a long way. That is why we are skipping to reduce the length of the video. If I start placing it, it will go more than 1 hour. So the last move played by black is queen a5, knight g3. Knight g3 is a very good move. Alternative, bishop g5, knight into e4, queen into e4, g6, bishop into e7, rook f e8, b4, queen into a2, b5, knight into e7, or rook into e7, queen h4, or after knight into e7, bishop b1 also playable. Let us go back to the game. Last move played is the excellent move, knight g3, d into e3, f into e3, queen into a2, knight f5, queen e6, not queen into b2. Let us go back and see that. Not queen into b2, bishop h6, g into h6, instead of knight e8. Let us go back and see that. Knight e8, queen e4, after g into h6, queen g3 check, knight g4, queen into g4 check, king h8, queen e4. Queen e4 and wins. So let us go back to the game. What is the last move played is queen e6, bishop h6. Again a good move by Kasparov. Knight e8. If knight e5, let us go back and see. If knight e5, queen into b7 with the threats of knight into e7 and bishop into g7. Let us go back. The last move played is knight e8, queen h5. Again a good move by Kasparov. The last move played by Kasparov is queen h5. Now the threat is bishop into g7, this one, followed by knight into e7, queen into h7, mate. Karpov is already running out of time because the worst move queen a5. Sometime back he took 41 minutes. That's why he is running out of time. So Karpov played a g6. Black has to give up the exchange. If knight f6, let us go back and see. If knight f6, knight into e7, check, knight into e7, rook into f6, g into f6, or if queen into f6, bishop into h7, check. Or after g into f6, bishop into f8, king into f8, or queen into e3 check. Let us go back and see that also. King h1, king into f8, bishop c4. Let us go back and see that. King into f8, queen h6 check, king e8, queen into h7. Let us go back. Last move played is g6, queen g4, knight e5. Instead of knight e5, bishop f6. Let us go back and see. Bishop f6, bishop c4, queen e5, bishop into f8, king into f8, rook d7. Let us go back. Last move played by Karpov is knight e5, queen g3. Instead of queen g3, if knight into e7 check, queen into e7, bishop into f8, king into f8. Let us go back. The last move played is queen g3, bishop f6, bishop b5. Bishop b5 is a good move, with black left with only 14 minutes to reach the 40 move time control. White complicates further. Knight g7, bishop into g7, bishop into g7, rook d6, queen b3, knight into g7, queen into b5, knight f5, rook a d8. Black makes a normal developing move, but white avoids the expected reply and goes for further complications. Only 4 minutes left for Karpov. Rook f6, rook d2. Instead of rook d2, better was rook d7, but only 2 minutes left and the flag hanging. So rook d7 is better, but what he played is rook d2, queen e7, rook d d8, rook into f7, rook into f7, rook into f7. Instead of rook into f7, queen into d8 check, king g7. But what is played is rook into f7, king g8, and Karpov lost on time. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your time. Please subscribe so that you can see all the 24 games of this World Championship.